let's jump right into a story that is going to seriously mess with your head. Today, we're doing a deep dive into the classic folktale, Amavas kivo anderi rot, which roughly translates to That Dark Moonless Night. And let me tell you, this isn't just your standard ghost story. It's actually a brilliant masterclass in human psychology and the art of building pure suspense. We're going to break down exactly how this terrifying narrative manages to tap into our absolute deepest fears. Just picture this for a second. You are completely stranded in an unfamiliar place on a desolate, stormy night. It's pitch black outside. And then, out of nowhere, you hear the one voice in the entire world that you trust the most. Sujit, son, come outside. It's your mother. The voice sounds like it's in sheer agony, begging you for help. What's your very first instinct? You'd want to help, right? This story stabs right at that incredibly tense, vulnerable moment. So it really begs the question, how exactly do these old folk tales manipulate our minds so effectively? How does a simple campfire story make our heart rate spike? Well, as we unpack this today, you'll see exactly how the narrative takes a relatable physical fear and twists it into a deeply psychological terror. Section 1. The terrifying atmosphere and isolation. The author sets the stage for horror meticulously here. Our protagonist, Sujit, is struggling with his tired old bullock cart, totally bogged down in heavy rain and deep mud. You've got these thick black clouds, blinding flashes of lightning, and the unsettling sounds of wild animals piercing the silence. This sensory overload instantly establishes his utter helplessness. And then, cutting through the heavy rain, there's just the solitary, echoing chime of a temple bell. It builds this suffocating atmosphere of dread where you just know something terrible is about to happen. Section 2. The mysterious shelter and a warning. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how it visually illustrates a classic suspense technique, contrast. Outside, it's absolute brutal chaos, darkness, mud, and immediate physical danger. But inside this ancient stone Shiva temple, it's unnaturally peaceful. It's clean, there's the scent of sandalwood and incense, and the calm presence of an old sadhu. It gives you a brief moment to catch your breath. But in psychological horror, this kind of serene sanctuary is almost always the calm before the storm. And right on cue, the sadhu drops this absolutely chilling, cryptic warning. He just looks at him and says, "Not every voice belongs to a human." Boom, that completely sets the stakes for the rest of the night. It's a direct signal that the danger lurking out there isn't natural. That one line sends a shiver right down Sujit's spine. And honestly, ours too. Section 3. The arrival of the supernatural threat. Okay, so this right here is the major pivot of the story. This is where the folklore brilliantly swaps relatable physical isolation for an impossible supernatural mind game. Sujit isn't fighting the mud or the thunderstorm anymore. He is up against an entity that can literally read his mind and perfectly mimic the voices of the people he loves. It's a massive, terrifying escalation from a basic survival scenario to a full-blown psychological assault. It's past midnight. The tension is incredibly thick. Suddenly, Sujit hears a voice crying out from the dark. Someone is calling his name, sobbing. And it's his mother's voice. She sounds like she's freezing in the freezing rain, desperately pleading for him. Just imagine the sheer panic of that moment. Will Sujit actually cross the boundary of that safe temple and step out into the dark? Section 4. A night of deception and illusions. Sujit is practically out the door, his heart breaking, but the sadhu physically intercepts him. And this is where the true nature of the horror is revealed. The sadhu explains that this isn't just some standard, scary ghost. This spirit is literally weaponizing Sujit's own empathy against him. It takes the person you hold the absolute deepest love for, and it uses their voice. That is easily the most terrifying mechanic of the story. The real monster isn't some gruesome beast. It's your own pure, unfiltered love being used to drag you into the dark. Let's act as a guide here and decode the rules of the haunting, if you will. Look at the columns. The threat: the spirit uses love as bait. The defense: remaining strictly within the magical bounds of the temple, no matter what. And the shield: the sadhu's continuous chanting of Om Namah Shivaya. While the spirit tries to psychologically break Sujit down and pull him outside, the sadhu is actively battling that psychological attack with faith and mantras. It's an incredibly intense tug-of-war between devotion and deception. So, they survive the night. When morning finally breaks, the intense psychological warfare ends. But as Sujit steps outside, he sees the visual proof of what he barely escaped. There are bizarre, completely supernatural footprints encircling the exact perimeter of the temple. It's a chilling confirmation. The nightmare was absolutely real. That invisible, parasitic threat was pacing right at the boundary line all night long, just waiting for him to slip up. Section 5. The Science of Fear in Folklore. To really understand this, we have to look at the dark lore behind the spirit itself. This entity didn't just pop out of nowhere. It was born from severe tragedy. It was a woman whose husband died, which drove her into a descent of madness, ultimately leading her to take her own life in that very same stormy forest. Her unending grief literally transformed her into a malicious, deceptive spirit. She was so consumed by her own loss that she became a parasite, forever preying on the empathy and love of others. It makes the threat feel so much heavier and way more tragic. You can essentially think of this as the Trojan horse scare. It's a brilliant storytelling trope. The narrative takes the protagonist's absolute greatest strength, in this case Sujit's profound love for his mother, and flips it into a fatal flaw. It manipulates the audience because it makes us realize that being a good, empathetic person is exactly what puts the character in lethal danger. It totally bypasses our rational defenses. To wrap up the narrative arc, Sujit finally makes it out of the forest and arrives safely back at his village by the afternoon. And what does he see? His mother is perfectly fine. She's just sitting in the courtyard, laughing, completely safe. That moment really solidifies the sheer horror of what he went through. Every single tear, every desperate cry he heard the night before was a completely fabricated, manipulative, supernatural illusion designed to kill him. And that brings us to the end of this incredibly dark tale. But before we go, I want to leave you with one final provocative thought. Does our deepest love actually make us uniquely vulnerable to terror? This folktale essentially argues that the voices that sound the most familiar are the ones that can deceive us the most completely. It really makes you think, doesn't it? Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you on the next deep dive.